Okay, we are back today, and today is probably for some people it'll be their favorite episode, and for some they'll be like, "Man, this show's it's really got to do better, man. You got to do a better show. You got to get step your game up." It is just me today, no Dakota, because life happens. I am coming off an amazing vacation. Thank you to all the well wishes to anybody that reached out. I feel loved, I feel relaxed, and I feel ready to overwork once again. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. The number one thing we should talk about, and I'm trying to do double duty here, so I'm running all the feedback. Not sure how much engagement we're going to get right now with the new start time. I know consistency breeds patterns. I know I love patterns. I know I love being like, it's Sunday, tune into this show. Swig of coffee because I need a little coffee to get going. Jaron Boots Ennis versus, I can't even say this guy's first name, Uisma Lima. And I'm gonna say something like the big issue with this bout, right? The big thing that most people are gonna point to, and it's quite obvious, right? Is Jaron Boots Ennis is arguably one of the 10 best fighters in the world. Talent, eye test, obvious. Like everyone knows Boots is one of the best fighters. The problem is since 2019, and he beat a fighter, was it 2019 or 2018? There was a period in 2018 or 2019, I'm not going to do the research, where he fought really good pressure fighter and he chopped him up and beat him in like 2 or 3 rounds. It was like, wow, this guy is sensational. He looks to be the next guy. 2020 comes. Don't remember if he fought. I remember he fought Custio Clayton around 2021-ish, and it was like one fight that year. And then we've gotten to this modern Boots Ennis situation where it's inactivity. I don't think it's him per se. I don't know what it is, but we're not getting the fights that we want to see. And my fear is Ennis's style is based off of reflex and timing. So one concern I have is if he waits until he's 30, he still could be an amazing fighter. He still could be an undefeated fighter and run the table and be one of the greatest fighters of his generation. But my fear is we don't get to see, and this is a selfish fear, the best version of Boots Ennis. We don't get to see what he was fully capable with his boxing IQ, his skills, his reflexes. We don't get to see that crap all together. Now, Lima, to me, I'm going to give Boots a ton of credit for fighting this guy. He's coming in off of 3 wins in people's hometowns, coming to win. Really tricky fighter to describe, big physical guy. I'd say he plants his feet and punches with you, but most guys that do that, I feel like when you describe them as such, the vibe you get, and shout out to everybody. Jesus Sam in the chat, tons of people. Jesus Sam says, any chance in his struggles with Lima? I'm doing the breakdown right now, and I think there is a chance. And let me explain to you why. Lima, and I wish I could do a diagram and everyone would be like, your fundamentals is bad. But I watched, like when I watch older fighters, they place their shots. You know, they don't always hit, but they place their shots. Lima's a tricky guy in the sense that he can get you into what makes him difficult is he can get fighters into a pattern of you go, I go. What does that mean? He's just strong enough. He's got just enough reflexes where he can punch with you where you don't want to end up at the end of his punches. So what happens is guys will lead or guys will wait. They'll let him go and then they go. And it's more of a back and forth duel. I think this is one of these, like I keep saying over and over, it's a trap fight. Ennis is an exceptional fighter. He's fighting a fighter who's truly a top 10 fighter based on achievement, but nobody's really familiar with. He's fighting someone who's coming to win, someone who's not cutting corners, someone who's strong. He's not as talented as him. He doesn't have the reflexes. One thing I was concerned in the Karen Chudinov fight, and I think it's partially because Ennis was taking risks, is he was getting hit with right hands. With Lima, bigger man, bigger right hands, I don't see Lima hurting Ennis. But could this be the fight we see Ennis getting dazed? I don't know. On the other hand, Ennis is coming off the best performance of his career. He just took a fighter named Ennis Stanionis, who I think very highly of, and made him look like a nobody. He probably would be on track to be boxer of the year, given the rapid inactivity of fighters this year, if Terrence Crawford didn't beat Canelo Alvarez, moving up multiple weight classes. Crawford has sealed that award. Ennis can't really do much about it, but now Ennis has put himself in an interesting spot, right? And I think the tough part about this is he beats Lima, people laugh at him. Oh, who was Lima? But it's a good win. He struggles with Lima. It's the Karen Chudinoff situation. Ennis has never really recovered from the night Gervonta Davis and Hector Luis Garcia fought. He has never truly recovered from that bout with Karen Chudinoff, the first fight. He was the boogeyman. He was the monster. And then all of a sudden, now he's looking around going, what the freak do I do? Why aren't people as excited about my career? So I think the fight itself, this fight is a very consequential fight for fight fans. And it kind of tells us how good Ennis is going to be at junior middleweight. We don't know. I mean, he's a very big guy. Dakota's the big anti-weight cut guy. Ennis could go up multiple weights, but there could be there's just basic questions. How does his speed look? How does his power look? How is his timing? Is there an adjustment to fighting bigger, more physical guys? Is it seamless? There are questions that need to be answered. And Lima is like a great test for this because he is flawed in some capacities, but he's good at every question we have about him making the move up. I'm more and more excited about this bout as it gets closer because there are some unanswerable questions, and Lima is passing the exam every step of the way with everything I want to see a fighter do in the position he's in. Ennis trying to age out everyone. Everyone else gets beat up in tough fights. I don't think that's it. I don't understand what's going on. I have no access to Boots' team. I don't think that, like, when you're the level of fighter Ennis is, I find it hard to believe guys would be like, I'm going to strategically wait out the other. Like, he went to USA Boxing national tournaments. He almost was an Olympian. He lost to Gary Antoine Russell. Why would you go through all of that stuff, build yourself up as a pro, and then be like, we're going to strategically wait guys out? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's he likes fighting at home. But there's something that, like, if we knew the answer, I think the answer would be much more apparent and straightforward. Let's go through this undercard right now. The undercard took a big hit. And when I say the undercard took a big hit, for the best of my knowledge, I read an article by the great boxing writer Ryan Sanguia. Totally probably said his name wrong on boxing.com. He is amazing, right? Heavy hitter in boxing journalism. And Khalil Coe versus Jesse Hart, to the best of my knowledge, is no longer happening. We had heard this rumored by Man Key Crazy. He had brought it up that our guy, YSM Sports Media, had interviewed Jesse Hart, said the fight was off. Then there's that story. BoxRec still has it listed. It's really unfortunate because I've kind of touched on this in my own Substack prior, but the unfortunate issue around this fight is Khalil Coe is a promising fighter, but he's really had a rocky development, right? Early career draw, loses to Manuel Gallegos, avenges the loss, gets the win. Now he appears to be trending up because he gets a big win going on the road, beating a guy who would beat him, right? And he's taking on Jesse Hart, who Hart had a ton of momentum in the last decade. He almost beat Sordo Ramirez. He had 2 really good fights with him, loses to Joe Smith Jr., and he disappears. He goes back to Philly, and there never really were big opportunities for someone who, honestly, I felt like was going to get a bunch of marquee fights. He hasn't gotten those fights. It was a crossroads fight, in my opinion, between Jesse Hart, a really top fighter of his era. Can he still compete at the highest level against Khalil Coe, who I think people have had reasonable doubts around where does he stand in the sport? Can he make the jump? This was the first kind of Manuel Gallegos is a tough veteran pressure fighter who tests your conditioning. But Jesse Hart was going to be the first guy that was going to kind of make Khalil Coe have to show off his boxing IQ, make him show that he has different speeds, different gears in the ring, able to be versatile. If you're not versatile, Jesse beats you. It's unfortunate that fight's no longer happening. Alexis Barriere, probably said his name all wrong, is taking on Guido Vianello. I believe I've seen him. It feels like I'm watching fewer and fewer of these developmental cards. It feels like 2 to 3 years ago. A swig of coffee. It's hard when you're doing a one-man show to get your coffee breaks in. It feels like a couple of years ago, I got to really nerd out on these undercards because it felt like there are more undercards occurring, and I could really kind of assess talent. With Alexis Barriere, I remember him as I wouldn't say older because he's younger than me, but it's like a heavyweight who might be approaching or at or around 30. He's taking on Vianello, who, is starting to have a rough go of things. Vianello lost to Richard Torres. He's having trouble winning the big fights. The only big fight that he's won was against Arslanbek Makhmudov, who fights this weekend. We'll get to that in a little second. But this is a sink or swim for both guys. I am a hardcore enthusiast, and I have no clue really much about Alexis. And for Guido Vianello, he is a former Olympian from the 2016 Olympic Games, and now he's being brought in to test up-and-comers that have ambitions to fight for the title. The best way to fix that is to win. So, consequential fight. I also think it's a fight that maybe doesn't move the needle for some. The bout that really stands out to me is Tahmir Smalls versus Jose Roman. Jose Roman is a fighter you might remember. He beat Jaleel Hackett. I mean, that was a weird one because I could see where the judges scored Jaleel Hackett fight. For Roman, I could see honestly how Mark Castro lost his fight. I thought, maybe I'm a homer, I thought Castro and Hackett won those fights. I just thought they won them in really unpleasing, ugly ways that I'm not mad that they lost because the fights were so ugly and unflattering. Let's see. I'm going to get to this in a second. But I just felt like it was like a really, really ugly fight that came into ugly results for those fighters. Tahmir Smalls, big puncher. I saw him get a big knockout. Who did he knock out? He knocked out someone at the 2300 arena. Did he knock out Clarence Booth? I bet it's Clarence Booth because he knocked out a durable veteran. The big thing I saw with Smalls was he looks like a puncher, sits down, shot, stopped Clarence Booth and around. He's entering on a 3-fight knockout streak. One thing to note, though, when he gets in, like he fought this guy, Sean Terrius Martin, somewhat close fight on paper. I don't remember seeing that, but there's a lot of these small feeder leagues that I'm missing on. That also seems like a good fighter. I think this is a 50-50 fight. I think Tahmir Smalls has to impact this fight with his power. I think Roman is very live in here. And I think what's dangerous about this fight for Smalls is that Roman's coming off a win. Roman's coming off a win, and Roman is going to be like, oh, I just beat an up-and-comer. I beat a top guy, So I think when a guy has that momentum, I just beat this really heralded guy. Jaleel Hackett on paper was more accomplished than Tahmir Smalls. It's a really interesting fight. To me, that's a real crowd pleaser. Giorgio Visioli taking on James Crunch Time Wilkins. Wilkins is a word-of-mouth gym guy that's always had big buzz. I don't know a single thing about Visioli. He's a fighter from the United Kingdom who has fought decent but not great opposition, in my opinion. So that's one that could possibly be interesting. Zaquan Moses, 5th fight of his pro career. That's always interesting. Harley Medeiros building up on the undercard. That is it for that one. Now we're going to go to my guy, Nicholas, in the chat. He said, what do you think of Dave? Let me timestamp this for those people that are going. What do I think of Dave Allen versus Arslanbek Makhmudov, my guy. This is one of those that I think a lot of people are going to be divided on, right? So I remember doing this podcast, different iteration of this podcast, but I remember doing this podcast and having buddies who'd be like, hey, man, what do you think of this or that? And what do you think of this guy, the White Rhino, Dave Allen? And I guess at the time, maybe he had a social media presence, but I was unaware of it. And I never really paid him any attention. He kind of lost in his consequential fights. He seemed like a character. I always found him as a fascinating interview or someone to listen to, but I never really saw his trajectory being that of a star. Arslanbek Makhmudov at the same time always had that same energy, but he was more like a scary person. Like he gave off like a movie villain fear. He's a menacing big guy. He's got this face that looks like a movie villain, although I'm sure he's a nice guy. Very intimidating. And then he takes losses to one of which Aget Cabell, and then Guido Vianello. So those are the two losses. My gut feeling on this is, and I know Dave Allen's win is over Johnny Fisher, and I know the first fight, I know the first fight was a good one with Johnny Fisher and probably too close to, be compared, or too close for comfort, I should say, right? Take a second sip. A part of me thinks I'm a big momentum guy, right? Momentum, if you listen to my pod, momentum is a huge thing with me. Love momentum. I think Makhmudov's momentum is going the wrong way. He's working with one of the best boxing minds in the sport, which is Mark Ramsey. So when Mark Ramsey's working with you, never count anything out, because Mark is just one of the smartest people in boxing. That said, I think Dave Allen being around Pat Brown, someone that's being labeled a blue chip prospect, a top fighter of this era, the Matchroom's really behind. I think he really has a different self-belief. I think he's going to get the win here. And I think the fairy tale story of Dave Allen is going to get him a fight against one of these older past their prime legends, whether it's Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua. He's going to end up with a fight that he's probably unqualified for because he worked his butt off. And I think it's also because personality matters. I think that Arslanbek rains a hailstorm on him in the first 2 rounds. Dave needs to keep his composure and move and try to win on the cards down the stretch. Either that or get stopped in the first half. I mean, you're very right. Like, the Arslanbek Makhmudov game plan is not one that should surprise you. He's big and physical, and he's going to try to implement his size, power, and will upon his opponent early on. When we've seen him have trouble is when someone gets through that and then forces him to work at that same pace that he no longer wants to work at. When Aget Cabell, who I think is one of the best guys in the division, when he forced him to work, that's when the fight got weird. When Guido took him into uncomfortable territory and started targeting his eye, he didn't like it. So I think the big thing with Allen is it's not just about weathering a storm. It's about giving him adversities to fight through. He needs to make this a fight where Arslanbek needs to battle back from something, because we haven't seen him be able to mentally fight back from dark places just yet. Question. I just want the truth. Do you think Boots' goal is Abbas Barayu? I mean, that's a tough dude. I don't know what Boots' goal is. Let's just keep Boots on this fight, because that could be something. Let's see what else. So I'll go through the undercard. Is there an undercard fight that I really like on this? There is. So for this undercard, I want to talk about this. Earlier this year, there's 2 fights. So I'm going to talk about these 2 right now. I remember watching this live and being so excited because, I guess first and foremost, I'm a boxing nerd. And a part of me was like, is George Ledard a guy? So they had a George Ledard, Jimmy Sands type card. And then there's Junaid Boston, probably said it all wrong, against Bilal Fawaz. And Junaid Bostan had stood out for me for kind of having a big personality, but I'd never fully seen it. And Bilal Fawaz kind of roughed him up. Felt like Fawaz should have won the fight. If I remember off memory, it was a draw. Happened in January. They're rematching in October. I'm not sure why it's so long, but this is a sink or swim for Junaid Bostan, a guy that I think really had ambitions of being a champion. If you're able to be a champion, champions respond to adversity really well. So this should be a performance where he levels up or he's going to crumble. I don't think that there's a middle ground for this fight. I think that there's going to be an extreme result of either he can't do it or he's going to excel. Padley-Reece Bellotti, I did a breakdown on this. Very fascinating style because I would have thought Padley would fight him as a boxer. Instead, I think Padley's going to press Bellotti as he's moving down in weight, and Bellotti tends to fight the way in my brain I think Padley fights, which is moving around, mixing it up, and a ton of volume. That is a sneaky, really good fight. And if you absolutely love boxing, maybe don't love college football, maybe you have plans for the evening. You can't watch the Boots fight. You're going to watch the Boots fight on delay. Padley Bellotti, I wouldn't be mad if that's the fight that you're all in on. One other card I want to talk about before we start breaking down some of these other. Well, I got two more. I guess I'll go because Jesus M is in the chat and he's our guy. Let's talk about let's talk about Brandon Glanton stops Marcus Browne. And the whole card there was fun. These African cards are just off the hook with the what's going on and over there. They're extremely long, big stages. It's like marathon cards, but I quite enjoy them. You know, I'm turning into a guy that just enjoys good quality fights. It is so for Glanton. It's tough, right? Because Marcus Browne was very inactive. He had only fought once since the Better Beef loss. Moves up to cruiserweight. Actually Browne was doing really well, but the physicality of Glanton was too much. He couldn't really keep him off. He didn't like the pace that was being put on him. And just kind of broke him down and then forced Browne to not come out of the corner. I think Glanton's always a fascinating figure in the sport and in the mix for fights because Glanton doesn't see himself as an opponent. Glanton doesn't see himself as, oh, I've lost a fight. I'm less than. Oh, I lost a fight. I'm going to do it. He's a fighter who I think comes to win in every fight, and his game plan is put damage on people. So I think Glanton's always in the mix, and I think that as long as he wins and stays busy, he's a viable contender for any champion that hasn't beat him. I think him versus Zordo is a real fight. I think him versus obviously him, Jay Apataya. And, you know, there's always guys moving up in this division. And cruiserweight, if we're being honest, traditionally is not that interesting of a division. We went through a cruiserweight renaissance with the cruiserweight tournament where we had a ton of good fighters. And even then, people weren't that interested. When you had Usyk and Murat Gosiev and all these good fighters, people still didn't care that much. So it kind of tells you where the division is. So I think Glanton's always in the mix. Also, we're going to touch on our guy, Jollioff. So let's talk about that. I can't say his first name, so we'll just say Jollioff. He looked really bad, to be honest. It was I think that it's quite clear at this point. The expectation of his pro career is very muted, to say the least. Ton of potential, but the potential just does not seem to be reached. He does not seem to be someone who's able to adapt to a pro style. And I think part of the problem is he never fully turned pro. He stayed amateur to win 2 Olympic gold medals at super heavyweight. In this fight, he was lucky to win the fight. He looked very fatigued. He looks like all the stereotypes people say about an amateur fighter. He's really good for the first 3 or 4 rounds, and then he has a lot of trouble because he expends far too much energy early in the fights. I don't see him getting much better. I don't see him getting much better, and it's time and time again, we're getting these performances that are just very, very underwhelming, and for someone with his accomplishments, and I think part of the problem is I'm not sure if he has the deep passion for professional boxing as he does for amateur boxing. And like Mark Ramsey told me in my story this week that's on Boxing Scene about Eye the Tiger boxing, amateur boxing and professional boxing are more different than ever. So if you're a great amateur boxer right now, you might not be a good pro boxer. And I think that's best seen with the lack of professional boxing champions from Uzbekistan. They've got all these amazing amateurs, and yet they're not dominant as professional boxers. And it's pretty much because they've figured out a system that's really good at playing tag and, being elusive and quick in 3-minute rounds or 3-minute rounds, but they haven't adapted to the pro game just yet. They've just gone all in on an amateur style. And I think that's hurting him because in the heavyweight division, out of any division, you really need to have a professional style because power can change a fight. And I think he's hitting a ceiling right now unless he changes something. So those are my thoughts on that. Also coming up this week, we have a Red Owl boxing card. So let's get into this. I like these Red Owl. I haven't watched a ton of them, but I like the idea of a Red Owl boxing where it's like I have known nothing about Lay It Down Browne, Dante Browne. He's taken on I can't even say the guy's name. Grimardi Machucha. Said perfect. I guess it's a good fight. It's an undefeated fighter against a puncher. We'll see how that goes. I literally know nothing about it. Now, here are the bouts that I do know stuff about. Saul Sanchez rematch and Edwin Rodriguez. Rodriguez a little past his prime, but there is a story 2019. Edwin Rodriguez defeated Saul Sanchez off memory. That was Thompson boxing card, and I believe that was Saul Sanchez losing his first professional fight. Edwin Rodriguez has bounced around and been a tough journeyman, kind of like Dual Olegine, giving guys really hard fights throughout their careers. They're rematching. I would expect Saul Sanchez to win this one, though he is coming off a first-round knockout loss to John Real Casamero. If I'm remembering right, there was a weird weight thing around that. So who knows? But that's an interesting fight. 2020 Olympian Rashida Ellis will be on the card. Chada Fipes versus Jesse Mandapat is also a really, really interesting fight that I'm interested in. And Angel Perez is kind of an interesting up-and-coming fighter who I just want to see how he develops. He had a lot of power in the amateurs, and I'm curious to see what he brings. Now, here's another story that is very, very strange that I will get into, and now we'll go backwards. We're doing if I do it alone, then you get all over the place show. Angel Fierro's year is all over the place. Angel Fierro has had the weirdest 2025. He goes into a fight with Isak Pitbull Cruz. Most people are like, this fight sucks, or it's not a great fight, or Pitbull's going to win. Turns into a fight of the year type fight. To back and forth, banger, close fight. Everybody likes it. Wow, that was so great. Okay, great. I'm going to do the rematch. I think the rematch was on Pacquiao Barrios, right? Rematch there. Oh, he's pulled out. Robert Garcia pulls him over weight issues. Okay, there had been rumblings that he looked big before the fight. People were, he's out of the fight. Now he returns in a stay busy type fight in Mexico. Really confusing what happened. I'm not sure, but I shouldn't. Let me paint the picture. So Fierro's fighting an opponent. Let me get the guy's name. Abraham Cordero. So I would assume he felt disrespected or the guy was being dirty in some capacity. I'm not sure what he perceived, but things go from 0 to 60 rather quickly. Fierro proceeds to basically not listen to the referee and just street fight the guy in the ring. Technique becomes secondary. And at one point, he throws a kick and continues to punch after throwing a kick. The kick is to the leg, maybe shin area, etc. Immediately disqualified. So now Fierro goes from fight of the year contender to not being able to do the rematch to now losing basically a stay busy fight in Mexico over losing his cool. A very dangerous fighter, Angel Fierro, a guy who kind of reminds me of Rene Tellez Jaron, a guy who's, pulled off many upsets, but also had weight issues and showed up to fights maybe in less than ideal shape at times. And you kind of have wondered what guy you're going to get with Fierro. It's like you go all the way back to 2021 in Ring City Boxing, Ring City, USA, that early incarnation of TV boxing that happened a while back. And with Ring City, you look at it and you saw him pull off an upset against Alberto Machado on a card, where Machado was making a redemption story and coming back and looking to be a guy, and he beats him and then really did nothing with that momentum, ended up with a Juan Carlos Burgos draw. And I tend to think that Fierro is just going to be a guy who can't put performances together just yet because he's with one of the best trainers in the world. He's with one of the most professional teams in the world in Robert Garcia. And even then, he still can't make it work. So for me, as harsh as it might be, I think this just might be who Fierro is. He's going to be a high-level opponent. He's going to be a high-level gatekeeper who can very much win a fight against someone who maybe isn't what people think they are, or if he has a good camp, he overachieves. But this is I think it's going to be an up and down ride where he's never able to put a sustained run together for whatever reason it is. And maybe one day he'll explain that and we'll go into detail. Now let's go into the 360 Boxing Promotions card. So 360 Boxing had a card this past weekend headlined by Umar Desmond Bekov. He gets a win. Opinions, right? I spoke to him before the fight. I quite like him. I love Marvin Samudio. I think he's a fantastic coach. I see a lot of good things with Desmond Bekov. I want to start with that. He's got power. Power is a really great thing to have. My one fear with him is he's a little bit robotic. He's a little robotic. He's a little upright. And it just depends on who's there when he's there, right? Because he reminds me of kind of these old Eastern European, or not Eastern European, just old European fighters who used to fight real upright and tall. And at times the punches look mechanical and the head can be on the line, et cetera, et cetera. I think part of that also is he's rather young in his development. Yes, he's moving up the rankings, but it's not a great division, right? So let's see how many fights. I'd say he has like 12 or 13 fights, right? So let's go in here. So Umar the best. So he's got 13 pro fights, I believe, or is it 12? It says 12-0, but is that really? Yeah, he's 13-0, 9 knockouts. So he's a little beyond where I see a prospect, etc. But he's a very good fighter. I'll be interested to see his development because I think that, Chuck Bossecker is a really good matchmaker, and I'm kind of curious to see how they move him. Right Hook Roxy, to answer Jesus M's question, she did win her fight. Some adversity in the fight, I think Roxy has a lot of star potential. I think that with people that have kind of a look and talent, there's a lot of pressure. So, this was probably a fight where she had the most adversity. It wasn't a ton, but you could tell some of the shots she felt them. And I thought she handled it. They're not with a fighter with the potential of Roxy. You shouldn't rush it. You should let her develop on her own time. She's young, and just see where her career kind of takes her, because I think that she could be someone. I'd say Jesus M is Roxy a work in progress? No, I think Roxy's one of the best women's fighters now. I just think that it's hard. Women's boxing is hard. because you don't get 20 fights to fight for a title. You don't get 15 fights to fight for a title. You get about 10 at most. And I think she's still kind of adjusting from the amateurs to the pros. She did amateur boxing for a very long time. And that adjustment takes a little bit of time. It takes experience. But she's so compelling, she's going to find herself high in the rankings quickly because she's compelling and she's going to really do well. Is Roxy looking ahead for big fights, slow down? I don't know. Is there an example? We're calling out people. I think that like sometimes these young fighters just say people's name because it works on social media. You say someone's name and you get 5 times the views, and these kids are multimedia geniuses. We need to hire like a 20-year-old over here at this podcast. We'd probably get 20K more viewers. I don't see Roxy ready yet. I mean, I don't see her ready for the champions, but I think she's very well ready for the top contenders at this point. And it's just, for me, I see it with Roxy. I just think that she needs more ring time. That's the big thing I'm seeing. Kate Sandoval gets a win. The question is, where is he in the division? He's pretty advanced in his career now. He's almost to 20 fights. It's just about time to put him in a 50-50 fight. I like him. This performance was a little bit more flat, but he's still my guy, and I have a lot of belief in him. And Daniel Chucky Barriere with a really big win over Mario Hernandez. He had to prove that style wouldn't just beat him alone, like that a pressure guy can't just have your number. And I think this was a big win for Chucky's confidence to beat a guy coming off a win over Jesus Pantorita Martinez. Let's go to the UK now for the absolute diehard fans tuning in right now. Nathaniel Collins and then Cristobal Lorente. Pretty good fight, man. Nathaniel Collins, I think he's one of these guys who could definitely fight at a world level. Back and forth action fight. Highly recommend that you check it out. Not a ton to really say about it other than I think that it should be rematched. I thought the scorecards were fair. I thought it was an enjoyable fight. It's hard to watch a draw and ever say that's a fair decision, but this one felt like both guys really came to win. Both guys really put it on the line. I think Lorente is a lot better than people gave him credit for, so I don't think it's a knock on Collins. I want to see the rematch. I want to see how they develop. On the undercard, Willie Hutchinson defeated Mark Jeffers on the undercard. I was actually asked on the world famous Substack last week, about that fight, and I did a breakdown. And lo and behold, I got it right, which is a rare occasion. Hutchins is just basically Mark Jeffers, but with more power, more tricks, more durable. So it was like the same fighter fighting each other, but Hutchins just had better attributes than Jeffers. And I think that's how it played out. Another thing of note is Cecelia Braekhus. Cecelia Braekhus defeated Ema Kozin to retire a unified, maybe even undisputed, I'm not fully sure, champion. Cecelia Braekhus, the big thing that you should know about her, and we'll try to do her justice right now, because why not? Like, it's just me, here rambling. The big thing about her is that a good part of her career was when women's boxing was in the dark ages. So she turns pro in 2007. She's fighting all over the place. And really from 2009, 2 years after she turned pro, she fought like the best available talent that she could get. Another coffee break. And the hard part is that a lot of the fighters she fought, outside of like Mia St. John, who was an older fighter at the time, didn't get the same credit because the sport wasn't as televised. And when she started to get exposure, right? When she had, what she had done was basically accumulated all the belts from dating back to, 2009 to the Chocolatito Golovkin run. She gets boxing legalized in Norway. She fights in Norway. It's this wonderful story, really an ambassador of Norway. And then she fights Callie Reyes and gets dropped in that fight. It was Golovkin versus Vanes Martirosyan. It's originally supposed to be Golovkin versus Canelo, but Martirosyan stepped in. And against Callie Reyes, she gets dropped. And I think that left an unfavorable impression on a lot of fans. Like, here's this person with a long run, and her fight, she had the last fight on HBO, but then I'd say the last time we really saw her on DAZN was like against Jessica McCaskill, a younger fighter who used youthful energy to kind of beat her. And then we saw her against Terry Harper, and she got a draw against Harper, which was pretty impressive, to be honest, because Harper's a good fighter. But the hard issue about Cecelia's career is that she just simply didn't get the credit for her accomplishments during the time. And when you look back, there's not the familiarity with the name, so people don't go, oh, there's so-and-so and no so-and-so. But she really held it down for many, many summers for women's boxing. And someone like her deserves a lot of respect because she had longevity in the game that not a lot of fighters do. Okay, we're keeping it going. Breakdown on some fighters. I was asked to do a film breakdown, so we're going to get to those right now. CAMILA Zamoran. Really like her as a fighter. She's a lower weight fighter. I think she would be a nice addition to any of these lower weight. Like, you got Kim Clavel, you got Yoke-Stavaya, you used to have Sinise Estrada. She's not quite where Gabriela Fandora is, but she's close enough. A Mexican fighter with good power, puncher, and see where her record's at. Let's check the records. She's 12-0, 17 years old. So probably when she turns 18, we're going to start to see her more and more often. She's already built up a 12-0 record by the age of 17. Her last fight was a credible win. I think that when she's able to get to 105 pounds in the next couple of years, she's going to be a player. I think that she's going to actually be someone that we hear about. So that's like an early premonition that she's going to be a factor. You're going to see her against either debuted as a standout, or you're going to see her, coming in on the B side, kind of like we told you about, what's that girl from the Coachella Valley? Cetali Ortiz, when she fought Franchon Cruz. We're like, this girl can fight. Watch out for her. And then she goes in and wins. Christian Medina. That's the next fighter I was asked to break down. So let's see. Christian Medina. So, boom. Okay. 43. Christian Medina just won a title. He beat Yakshia Takai on a huge knockout streak. Didn't go back to watch the Nishida fight. I should go back to watch that. The thing I notice about him, he reminds me of, who is that guy from Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez's past? Let's go Roman Gonzalez. This is for the hardcore of hardcores right now. This is like the only the people asking these questions. I think it's Francisco Rodriguez Jr. is who he reminds me of. Just a really, really tough physical. Yeah, Francisco Rodriguez Jr. I wonder if Francisco Rodriguez Jr. still fights. He probably does. Yep, he just fought, and he was the guy that beat Galiafai. He reminds me of Francisco Rodriguez Jr. What I like about Christian Medina is he's really good at slipping punches. He loads up on that left foot, so he slips and he rips. And sometimes it's better to have an identity and know who you are as a fighter than to be a versatile fighter. And I think Medina is a prime example of someone who's very, very dangerous in this division, especially with this division now kind of changing. Who's the guy at this division, right? Because Junto is no longer in the division. I think we can all consensually say Junto was the best guy. So he's the lone belt holder in the division. I don't think he's as dynamic or versatile as Junta Nakatani, but this is someone who has a style that's built on breaking fighters down in a division that traditionally not a lot of fighters have a ton of power in. So if he can take your punches and withstand them, especially during his prime, this is someone who can accumulate damage and break guys down and win impressively. So I think he's someone to watch for. That's my analysis. I was kind of hoping Dakota would come on to carry a little bit more of this. Now, I can't say this guy's name. Taiwo Agbaje, Agbaje. I don't know. So, yeah. So I watched him on Wednesday, and he stood out to me. He's from Africa. He came out to the Undertaker song during the telecast. Southpaw. He's not like a technical wizard, right? But you can tell he watches a lot of Gervonta Davis footage. He doesn't have the physical gifts. He doesn't have the talent. He doesn't have the experience. But there's something there. And I'm gonna pull up. I think he's like a very, very high level, maybe the guy that loses to the title holder, but he is something. 17-0. He's already got 2 more fights booked. One for, let's see. No, he already fought that one. He's got one for the end of the month. He fought it, like, look at the record of some of these guys, and who knows how good they were. But the guy he fought and knocked out was 7-0. The fight before that, 19-1, 24-4. I mean, he's fighting guys, and I get it. You go, okay, who have they fought? How good are they? Et cetera, et cetera. I'll push back and say, like, even like if you fight 17 fights, even if you're fighting not the greatest opposition, if you fight some guys with undefeated records or some veterans, inevitably, if there's not a level of talent, you're not going to win. He's fighting guys now with good records and still winning. There's something there. I think he's not to kill the lead, and if I still do it this year, I think he's one of the 10 more interesting prospects in boxing, because you have a guy who has a lot of potential, he has a lot of charisma, and he's really under the radar. His division, let me look up what his division is, because I'm not even fully sure what his division is. So he's a featherweight. So it's like another guy, albeit he's 33 years old. That's a little bit older, but I think that he's someone next year who could take the leap, and who knows? You know, you roll the dice, you see where he is. Final thing that people wanted me to discuss was a women's boxing bout between Jacky Calvo and Alma Mares. Kind of agreed with the commenter. He thought Jacky Calvo won. I did too, but this fight to me came down to the judges scoring the fight for the fighter who came forward. Let's see. It is Jacky Calvo is one of these fighters where, well, women's boxing is great because of this, right? You can take a loss, you can develop, and it doesn't hurt you as much. To me, I felt as though this fight, which is a good fight, interesting fight, the shots Calvo was landing, the accurate moving around shots, they weren't scored as much as just the raw aggression of Mraz. Hopefully, both fighters can get opportunities in the future to display their talents. Highly recommend hardcore enthusiasts check out that fight. It's time stamped down there. Well, that is my solo show. I went 50 minutes straight, no chase, with a few coffee breaks. I hope you guys appreciate it. Me and Dakota will be back in some capacity this weekend. Until then, take care.